Snow fell in slow, endless silence across the high plains, softening the cruel edges of the world. The wagon moved through it like a shadow, wheels crunching over ice, the mare's breath rising in white plumes that vanished into the wind. Inside sat a man and woman who had run out of words long ago. Their faces were chapped by the cold and by the years that had passed without the sound of a child's voice. The woman kept her gloved hands folded in her lap, pressing against the place her body had failed her, as if she could still coax life from memory. The man drove with a kind of stubborn grace, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the dim road that cut between drifts. Every motion was measured, as though control could save them from despair. They were on their way to town, supplies, maybe mail, maybe just an excuse to escape the cabin that had grown too quiet. The sky above was the color of lead, heavy with more snow to come. Wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of smoke from distant chimneys. For a long time nothing moved but the wagon and the weather. Then, from somewhere ahead, a cry cut through the stillness, short, sharp, human. The man pulled the reins. The mare stopped, snorting, steam rising from her nostrils. The woman leaned forward, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. He nodded, already reaching for the rifle tucked beside him. They followed the sound off the road, the wagon creaking through knee-deep snow until they saw her. A small figure running. A girl no older than 9, bareheaded, hair black and tangled, her thin clothes soaked and stiff with frost. She stumbled, fell, and tried to crawl away as they approached. The man jumped down, boots sinking into the snow. "Easy now," he said, voice low, the barrel of the rifle pointing down. The child froze, breathing in ragged bursts. The woman climbed out, her steps slow, deliberate, the way one approaches a frightened animal. She took off her shawl and knelt, wrapping it around the girl's shoulders. The child flinched but did not resist. Up close, she was trembling so hard her teeth chattered, lips split and blue. "You're safe now," the woman murmured. "No one's going to hurt you." The girl looked from one face to the other. Her eyes were dark and sharp, but hollowed by hunger. She said something soft in a language neither of them understood, clutching the shawl tighter. The man scanned the tree line. Tracks led from the woods, more than one set. His grip on the rifle tightened. "We should move," he said. Someone was chasing her. The woman nodded and helped the girl climb into the wagon. She sat between them, small and silent, watching the world pass as they turned back toward home. By the time they reached the cabin, dusk had settled like smoke. Snow pressed heavy on the roof and the fence was half buried. Inside, the air smelled of wood ash and cold iron. The man built a fire while the woman undressed the child's soaked garments and wrapped her in a wool blanket. She spoke gently, though the girl's eyes stayed guarded, her body tense as if she expected to be struck. When the fire caught, the orange light revealed bruises along the girl's wrist, half hidden by the blanket. The woman noticed but said nothing. She only tightened the wrap and handed her a tin cup of broth. The girl drank greedily, hands shaking so much that drops spilled down her chin. The man watched from the doorway, the rifle resting against the wall. They didn't ask questions that night. The girl gave no name, only silence and the faint echo of fear. When the woman asked where she came from, she lowered her eyes and whispered one word, "Away." It was enough. The couple exchanged a glance across the fire, the kind that carried years of unspoken sorrow and one small, fragile spark of purpose. Later, when the lamps burned low, they made a bed of furs beside the fire and told her to rest. The girl hesitated, then lay between them as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She curled into the woman's side, one hand drifting until it found the man's arm. The warmth of that touch startled him. He stared at the ceiling beams, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. The woman turned her face toward the child, brushing a strand of hair from her brow. For the first time in a long while, she smiled, not from happiness but from recognition of something that still lived inside her. Outside, the wind screamed across the hills, hurling snow against the windows. The fire snapped, shadows flickering across their faces. The man thought of the tracks he'd seen in the woods, broad, heavy, too many for hunters. Whoever had chased this child wasn't far. But he said nothing. For now the cabin was warm and the girl was safe between them. Tomorrow could bring whatever hell it wished. Tonight was theirs. As sleep crept in, the woman whispered into the dark, "She's meant to be here." The man didn't answer, but his hand reached across the furs until his fingers brushed the girl's. 3 hands linked in silence while snow piled higher outside, erasing every trail that had led them there. And for the first time in years, the long winter night did not feel empty. Morning came pale and hushed, the snow outside glowing blue beneath a sky of glassy white. Smoke drifted from the chimney, curling into still air. Inside, the cabin was alive with faint warmth and the quiet sound of movement. The girl sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket that dragged behind her like a shadow. She watched the woman stir a pot on the stove, her dark eyes following every gesture. The man stood by the door, oiling his rifle, glancing toward them from time to time as though to make sure this strange piece wasn't a dream. When the woman handed the girl a wooden spoon and showed her how to stir, the child hesitated, then copied her carefully. A soft laugh escaped the woman, small, uncertain, but real. The man looked over his shoulder, saw the flicker of joy, and felt something stir inside him. For years, their home had been silent except for wind and chores. Now, even the sound of a spoon against a pot felt holy. After breakfast, the girl followed him outside. The snow was knee-deep, glittering beneath a weak sun. He showed her how to scatter seed for the hens, how to move slow so they wouldn't startle. She nodded, copying his pace, her breath fogging the air. When a hen pecked near her boots, she laughed, a clear, high sound that startled them both. He found himself smiling, the scar at the corner of his mouth pulling tight. "You'll do fine here," he said, though she couldn't understand his words. Maybe she didn't need to. In the afternoons, the woman taught her small things. How to thread a needle, how to mend a glove, how to say a few English words. "Snow," she said, pointing out the window. "Fire." "Home." The girl repeated each one softly, voice trembling on the last. That night she whispered the same word to herself before sleep. Home, as if testing whether it could belong to her. Days folded into one another, marked by chores and thawing hearts. The man began chopping extra firewood without being asked. The woman started humming again when she swept the floor. The girl began to smile without fear. Yet beneath that peace, unease lingered like smoke that refused to clear. The man often paused at the window, eyes scanning the woods. Once he found a set of boot prints near the creek, half filled with snow. He told himself they were old, but the shape of them, broad, heavy, didn't sit right. He wiped them away with the end of his boot and said nothing. One evening, as the wind rose outside, the girl sat at the table drawing in the ashes on the hearth with a stick. The woman noticed the pattern she made, a crooked line with 3 circles above it. It looked almost like letters, but not one she recognized. "What is that, sweetheart?" she asked gently. The girl froze, then brushed her hand across the ashes, erasing it all. The woman didn't press her, but the image stayed in her mind. Later, when she told her husband, his jaw tightened. "She's running from something," he said. "I saw tracks again today near the ridge." His tone carried more fear than anger. She touched his arm, but he turned away, staring into the fire as if it might offer an answer. That night, the storm returned. Snow lashed the windows, wind howled through the cracks. The 3 of them slept close, the girl between them as always. In the darkness, she whimpered, murmuring in her own language. The woman woke, brushed the child's hair back, and saw tears slipping from closed eyes. "Sure you're safe," she whispered. But the girl shook her head, still half dreaming. "They come," she breathed. "They come soon." The woman froze, her heart knocking hard against her ribs. She didn't wake her husband, didn't want to give life to the fear, but sleep never returned. Morning brought sunlight sharp as glass and silence too perfect to trust. The man stepped outside to fetch water and stopped short. The snow near the barn was marked by fresh tracks, 3 sets this time, circling back toward the trees. He followed them a short distance, found a scrap of red cloth snagged on a branch, and felt the weight of something inevitable pressing down on him. When he returned, his face was pale. "We're not alone out here," he said quietly. The woman's hand went to the girl's shoulder, instinctively protective. The girl looked from one to the other, sensing everything even without the words. That evening he reinforced the door, checking every window latch twice. The woman baked bread though no one was hungry. The smell filled the cabin, warm and steady against the cold. The girl sat close to the fire, watching them both with a strange awareness in her eyes, as if she knew the peace they'd built was fragile, and that the snow outside could hide anything. When night fell, they gathered again by the fire. The man's arm was around his wife, the girl leaned against her side. The world outside was buried in silence, but inside there was warmth and the faint hum of life. The woman reached out, tracing the edge of the girl's small hand. "Whatever comes," she said softly, "we stay together." The man nodded, eyes on the flames. The girl repeated the last word, "together," and smiled, not knowing that beyond the tree-line figures were already watching their light flicker through the storm. The wind rose again, carrying snow like ash across the valley, and the night felt heavy with promise and warning both. Dawn came thin and gray, the sky a smear of smoke above the frozen hills. The man rose first as always, pulling on his coat and stepping outside into the cold. The snow squeaked under his boots, brittle and clean, but the air held a silence that didn't feel right. He went to the barn, meaning only to fetch feed for the mare, and stopped dead. A figure stood beyond the fence, dark coat, hat low, watching. For a moment neither moved. Then the stranger turned, disappearing into the trees. The man's stomach tightened. He backed away slowly, every instinct whispering danger. Inside, the woman was helping the girl braid her hair. The child looked peaceful, her laughter light, unaware of the shadow that had just passed over them. When the man entered, snow still on his shoulders, the warmth in the room seemed to flicker. "Someone's out there," he said. "Watching." The woman froze, the comb still in her hand. The girl looked between them, her smile vanishing. "How many?" the woman asked. "One that I saw," he answered, "but I'd bet there's more." He checked the rifle, loading fresh cartridges, then went window to window, gauging sight lines. The girl followed him, silent as a ghost. When he noticed her, he crouched down, looking her in the eyes. "You need to tell me who they are," he said. She hesitated, then glanced toward the door as if the words themselves might summon her pursuers. "Bad men," she whispered finally. "They take children. Work for railroad." Her English was broken, but the meaning cut clean. "You ran from them?" She nodded once, eyes filling. "They kill if fined." The woman drew the girl into her arms, holding her tight. The man felt something inside him harden, not fear but resolve. "Then they won't find you," he said. He shuttered the windows, pushed furniture against the doors. The cabin that had once been a sanctuary began to feel like a fortress. By midday the wind picked up again, carrying flurries across the valley. The girl sat by the fire, clutching the woman's rosary, lips moving in a quiet prayer that needed no translation. The man stood by the doorway, rifle across his arm, scanning the woods. When he saw movement, just a flicker between the pines, his breath caught. "They're here," he murmured. The first shot came a moment later, splintering the top of the doorframe. The woman pulled the girl to the floor, covering her with her body. The man fired back through the window, the sound deafening in the small space. The air filled with the smell of gunpowder and burning wood from the hearth. Outside, muffled shouts answered, then more gunfire. The girl covered her ears, eyes wide with terror. The man reloaded, knuckles white. "Stay down," he barked, though his voice trembled with the effort to sound calm. The attackers circled, testing every side of the cabin. Bullets tore through the walls, scattering splinters. The woman dragged the girl toward the cellar door, pulling up the trap in the floorboards. "Get in," she urged. The girl shook her head. "No leave," she whispered. "You come." But the woman only smiled, brushing snow from the child's hair. "You're our daughter now," she said softly. "And daughters get protected." She pressed the girl's small hand to her chest, over her heart, before pushing her down into the dark. The man fired until the rifle clicked empty, then grabbed the shotgun from the mantel. Through the smoke, he could see one of the attackers creeping closer, face hidden by a scarf. He waited until the man reached the porch, then pulled the trigger. The blast threw the stranger backward into the snow. The others fell silent. The woman joined him, pistol in hand, her face pale but steady. "We can't hold them forever," she said. "We don't have to," he answered. "We just need to outlast them." Minutes dragged into hours. Snow thickened, swallowing the world in white. The girl crouched in the cellar, listening to the thunder of guns above, her hands pressed over her ears. Between shots she prayed for them both. Upstairs, the man and woman moved with quiet precision, reloading, covering the windows, keeping the fire low so smoke wouldn't reveal them. When the shooting finally stopped, they didn't relax. Silence meant nothing good. The man stepped to the window, peering through a crack. Nothing but swirling snow. Then he saw it, a flicker of flame behind the barn. "They're burning it," he said. "Trying to smoke us out." The woman's eyes met his, fear and fury tangled together. "Then we finish this now." She handed him a spare pistol, her fingers brushing his, a brief spark of shared courage. He opened the door and stepped into the storm. Snow whipped around him, the cold biting like knives. The shapes of the attackers moved between the drifting flakes, 3 of them left, circling. He fired first, dropping one, then ducked behind the trough as bullets struck sparks from the frozen wood. The woman fired from the doorway, hitting another. The last man rushed forward, knife flashing. The husband met him halfway, wrestling in the snow, the knife grazing his side. With a shout, he drove his fist into the man's throat, then struck him again until the struggle went still. When it was over, the barn was burning bright enough to paint the snow red. He stood gasping, smoke curling from the wound on his side, eyes searching for more enemies. There were none. The woman ran to him, pressing her hands against the blood soaking through his coat. "It's shallow," he said through clenched teeth. "We're all right." She held him, forehead against his chest, shaking. The girl crawled from the cellar and ran to them, arms wrapping around both. The three of them stood together in the falling snow, the flames behind them cracking loud enough to wake the mountains. The man looked down at the girl, then at his wife. "It's over," he said, though his voice carried doubt. Somewhere out there more could be coming. But for that moment, in the white hush of winter, they were alive. The fire burned high, lighting their faces with a fierce, fragile hope, and the storm closed around them like a curtain, leaving the question of what waited beyond for another dawn. The fire had long since died, leaving only red veins of heat pulsing in the ash. The man sat propped against the cabin wall, his coat dark with blood but his eyes still alive. The woman cleaned the wound by lamplight, her hands shaking from exhaustion. Outside, the wind clawed at the wooden boards, carrying with it the whisper of horses in the distance. The girl sat curled by the hearth, clutching the small wooden cross the woman had given her, her breath shallow with fear. "They'll come again," the man said quietly. His voice was hoarse but certain. "Men like that don't stop while they think they can take something back." The woman met his eyes. "Then we don't wait here to die." She tied the bandage tighter. "We move north toward the river. There's a post there. Someone will help us." He nodded, though his face twisted with pain. "Then we go before daylight." They packed what little they had, jerky, a flask, the rifle, the cross, and stepped into the storm before dawn. The world outside was an ocean of white and silence. Every breath hung like smoke. The girl walked between them, her small gloved hand gripping the woman's tightly. Behind them, the cabin was a faint black square swallowed by snow. It had once been their world, now it was a graveyard of everything they'd lost. 4 hours they walked, pushing through knee-deep drifts. The man's wound reopened, crimson spots marking their trail. The woman noticed but said nothing. She could see the way his jaw clenched with every step, the way his breath came in ragged bursts, yet he never slowed. When the girl stumbled, he lifted her without a word, carrying her against his chest, her tiny face pressed into his scarf. The wind howled across the plains and still they moved. By midday the storm had thinned to a cold, steady fall. Pines loomed ahead, their branches heavy with frost. "We'll stop there," he said, nodding toward a hollow near the trees. The woman knelt to build a small fire, coaxing the flame from frozen twigs. The girl huddled close as the man sat with his back to a tree, eyes scanning the open horizon. For a moment the silence felt almost safe. Then came the sound, faint, rhythmic, the echo of hooves on hard snow. The man's eyes snapped toward the valley below. "They found us," he whispered. He rose slowly, hand on his rifle, his breath sharp in the cold. The woman's heart dropped. She could see them now too, 4 riders cutting across the plain, dark shapes against the white, moving fast. "Take her," he said. "Get to the river." "No," the woman said, voice trembling with anger. "We stay together." He turned to her, eyes fierce. "If they take her, none of this means a damn thing." But the girl tugged at his coat. "No, leave you," she said softly, tears freezing on her lashes. The man's expression broke for a heartbeat. He touched her cheek. "Then we finish this together." The riders closed in, guns drawn, faces hard beneath wide-brimmed hats. The man took cover behind a fallen log, the woman beside him loading ammunition with frozen fingers. The girl crouched in the hollow behind them, clutching her cross. The first shot cracked through the trees. Snow exploded beside the woman's shoulder. She flinched but held her ground, returning fire. Her shot hit a rider's arm. He spun and fell from his horse. The others charged forward. The man fired again, the rifle kicking hard against his wounded side. 1 rider dropped, but 2 kept coming. They dismounted, spreading apart, moving low through the snow. "Flankers," he hissed. "Stay down." Bullets whined through the air, chipping bark from the trees. Then silence. The kind that swallows sound right before death. The man moved to reload, and froze. One of the riders was already behind them, a knife in hand, his boots silent on the snow. The woman turned just in time, swinging the rifle like a club. It struck the attacker's jaw with a crack. He fell backward, but another shot rang out. The man jerked, hit again, shoulder this time, and dropped to one knee. "No!" the woman screamed, firing blindly into the storm. The final rider toppled from his horse, vanishing into the white. And then there was only wind and blood melting into snow. The woman dropped beside the man, pressing her hands against the wound. "Stay with me," she pleaded. He grimaced, gripping her wrist. Still here. His breath fogged the air. Still damn here. They waited until the echo of hooves faded into nothing. When the silence finally settled, it felt fragile, a silence that could break if anyone breathed too loud. The girl crawled forward and threw her arms around them both. "We safe," she whispered. The man nodded weakly. "We are now." By dusk they reached the frozen river. The ice stretched across the valley, a glistening mirror beneath the pink sky. "It'll hold if we move fast," he said. He took the girl's hand, the woman close behind. The ice groaned beneath their boots, but they pressed on, step after careful step. Halfway across, the crack came, sharp, splintering, and the girl screamed. The man lunged, dragging her forward as a slab of ice gave way behind them. Freezing water splashed up, soaking his legs. "Keep going," he shouted. The woman pulled the girl to safety on the far bank, then turned back. He was still on the ice, bleeding, half frozen, his strength nearly gone. "Take my hand," she cried, crawling toward him. He reached, their fingers brushing, then clasping tight. With a groan she pulled, every muscle burning. The ice creaked, bending but did not break. Inch by inch she dragged him onto solid snow. When they collapsed together she was laughing and crying at once. "You idiot," she whispered. "You stubborn, impossible man." He smiled faintly. "Told you I'd make it." The girl pressed close, wrapping her arms around them both. "Family now," she said softly. The man's eyes glistened. He reached out, brushed her cheek with trembling fingers. "Yeah," he murmured. "Family." They built a small fire under a rocky ledge that night. The flames flickered against the frozen river, lighting their faces with a soft golden glow. The man's wound had stopped bleeding, though he shivered under the blanket. The woman leaned against him, her beauty softened by fatigue but radiant in the firelight. The girl slept between them, breathing steady. "You think they'll come again?" she asked. He stared into the fire for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "They lost what they came for. We found what we were meant to." She took his hand and held it tight, and for the first time in years, there was no emptiness between them. Only warmth. Only life. By morning the storm had passed. The valley lay still beneath a pale sun, the snow untouched except for their trail leading north. The man rose slowly, pain etched into his movements but resolve in his eyes. The woman smiled at him, quiet pride in her gaze. The girl slipped her tiny hand into his. Together they walked toward the horizon, three shadows against the endless white. Behind them, the wind covered their tracks, erasing the past. Ahead, smoke rose faintly from a trading post, a promise waiting in the distance. And as the snow fell gently again, the land whispered their story to whoever might pass, not one of loss but of love that refused to die, even in the coldest heart of the Wild West.